We will now call the Martin County Board of Education meeting to order. Could we stand for the pledge?
Oh, sure.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Scott, can you give us the
Let's
message?
pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity once again to be able to gather to discuss the business of the school system here. Heavenly Father, thank and pray you would give us the guidance and the wisdom to make the right decision for our students and our staff and continue to make Martin County schools a better place. Dear Father, we thank you for all the blessings you bestowed upon us and pray you be with us and watch us over us throughout this meeting. In Christ's name I do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Can we get a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Can we get approval for our consent agenda?
So moved.
Been properly moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried for approval of consent agenda. We'll move down to our information and action items, starting with Ms. Santora.
That came up way faster than I expected.
That's okay, you have your beads on.
Okay, we're going to start with the March budget amendments. So with the March budget amendments we just had for state, we had an increase by $154,623.75. This was just the result of DPI adjustments. Federal increase of $19,959.14. This was also a result of DPI adjustments. And our capital outlay increased by $165,009. This was a result as a DPI adjustment, but this was due to a new bus that we're going to be receiving. Fund 8 increased by $3,150, and this is for donations that were received for our career fair. Do we have any questions? All right, budget amendments is up for approval, please.
Board, can we get a motion to approve the budget amendments in the quarterly financial report presented by Ms. Santora?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, been properly moved and seconded to approve the budget amendments. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed. You have your approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we now have our quarterly financial report. So this is just letting you know what our spending levels are as of March 17th. With state, it's 60.43%, local 71.06, federal 59.89, capital 58.92, school nutrition 65.19, and Fund 8 44.62. This is an overall of 61.33. Pretty consistent throughout the funding, and this is right on target for this time of year, so we are looking good. This is just for your information.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Questions? No?
All right, well, thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Ms. Lilly?
Good evening. Tonight I bring before you the 2025-2026 school calendar. And, sorry. So just to give you some of the background for requirements that we have to go by, we pay out 215 paid days for 10-month employees, and I add in July 4th for the 12-month employees just so that we can calculate all holidays. We are bound by a minimum of 185 days or 1,025 hours covering those 9 months. And we do go by the hours and not the days. And you'll see that in just a minute. We have a minimum of 10 annual vacation leave days, legal holidays that are scheduled by the state. Our start day can be no earlier than the Monday closest to August 26th, and our closing day has to be no earlier than the Friday closest to June 11th. The total number of teacher workdays for teachers employed for those 10-month terms shall not exceed 195 days, and there has to be at least 42 consecutive days when teacher attendance is not required in the summer. And for that, we have the calendar before you, and the red days are holidays. Our lilac color are optional teacher work days. Green are our mandatory teacher work days. I at the bottom, and they're white on there, are instructional days. Our gold color is early release days. Yellow are annual leave. And then our purple are parent-teacher conference days. And there's a link at the bottom if you'd like to bring up the whole entire calendar. And then the second half of the year, our semester would change in January. So our end of the semester would be on January 16th. And we would have work days following that. And then our last day would be on June 5th. Any questions about our calendar that's presented to you?
I have a question. Go ahead. I have a question about what happens if the legislature passes the early college. Will we have a different calendar then, or we'll have the same calendar?
No, we would continue with the same calendar for next year. Depending on when the early college is passed, we have 2 years from that point for implementation.
Okay.
So right now, we don't know when that could occur, but when it is passed, then we would have the option at the early college to start earlier if that was the input given from the administrators, teachers, and staff that they would like to. It's not a requirement, but it is an option.
So we would have a flexibility?
Yes,
Okay.
only for the early college
Yeah.
though,
Right.
not as a district. I
Right.
wish it was as a district, but it would give us flexibility for the early college only.
That was my question.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'd like to ask for approval.
Okay, board, she's coming before us. I know it's been a lot of work and sessions behind the scenes for this. Can we get a motion to approve the 2025-2026 school calendar as presented?
Move to approve. Second.
Been properly moved and seconded to approve the 2025-2026 school calendar. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That was strong. All opposed? Motion carried. Congratulations, Ms. Miller.
Thank you.
And now, let's talk about the budget.
Got 42 minutes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Scott. Good evening, Board. Ms. Santora and I wanted to come before you tonight just to present an overview of our budget process. We know that we have several new board members, and that sometimes review is good even for our veteran board members. We're just going to outline our entire process, how we get input from across the board, where we are in the process right now, anything that we, you might have read in the media that we might need to be considering right now as contingency plans. We just wanted to kind of give you an update on where we are in the overall process, as well as ensure that the board understands the overall process. So that is why we stand before you tonight. So the first thing we're going to look at is the beginning of the process. Where do we start when it comes to creating one of the most important things that we develop as a school system, our budget? Well, the first thing we do is we engage our staff, because this budget needs to represent every voice across our system. So we get input through comprehensive and targeted department meetings, so every voice matters in the process. Teachers, teacher assistants, but anybody can make requests for the budget to their school improvement team, to their principal. We do a comprehensive facility assessment. We even went as far as training our principals last school year in how to do a comprehensive assessment, how to walk your building, what to look for, things that you need to consider as you're developing your budget. So literally walking every inch of the building, outside and in, and looking for things like chip paint, baseboards in need of repair, floor tiles, bathrooms, every intricate detail of the school that makes for a more conducive learning environment. So once we have engaged the staff, and when we're talking about engaging the staff, we're talking about instructional needs, we're talking about personnel needs, and we're talking about those capital needs as well. Once we've really addressed the facility through a comprehensive walkthrough, then the school improvement team comes together and looks at all the needs of the school. So things recommended by staff, the walkthrough that was done by administration and the school improvement team. They sit down and they look at what are the needs of my school? What do we need to put in our budget? And then the principal actually compiles all of those items. And there is actually linked in this presentation a sample that was actually submitted by one of our schools this year. There is a document that asks for all of their capital requests, their personnel requests, etc. Anything that their team has come up with, they actually submit that to us. They tell us why they need it, what school improvement goals it coincides with. Because this isn't just about a budget, there's a bigger picture here. Our strategic plan, you'll remember, was adopted earlier this year. Our school improvement plans coincide with that, and our budget should fund and support those strategic goals. And so the principal explains how this budget request aligns to the school improvement plan, and of course why they don't currently have the money, because each school is allotted money on a yearly basis too. So some, if not many, of their needs can be met with those dollars that they are given, but some things of course cannot. And so there is a sample in there for your review as well. So we start with the school input gathering, and then we move to Ms. Santora and her department and the district level compilation.
So once we receive those items from the different schools, we will compile that into our spreadsheet, and we just list it by school and by project. We always put the most needed, the high need at the top, and then we enter any other additional capital needs that Hank, maintenance director, has determined that we need to add for different projects. We sort through that, and then we try to align it with what funding that we are going to receive.
So each department head also gets to present their budget, and so that same process that the schools went through, every department, for example, technology submitted a budget as well. And then of course, Hank and maintenance will submit a budget as well. Our curriculum department will submit a budget as well. And so when it gets to the district level, we're looking at all of those needs. And then this year, what we are striving to do is create a comprehensive 5-year plan. One thing in talking with our county commissioners that they shared is that our budget can be overwhelming. So the needs can be very overwhelming. I think last year, we submitted requests for, I think, over $8 million in capital projects, close to $8 million or $6 million in local projects. The needs are astronomical. And so one thing we're trying to do is honor their request and also be very strategic about our request and map them out over the next 5 years. So instead of asking for everything holistically, because we know that over the past several years we receive about the same amount of money, which means we have to go through and shave that $8 million down to about $500,000. So you can imagine that a lot of projects have cycled through for many, 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 many years because we're just simply not able to accomplish them. So we're trying to spend some extra time this year, honor their request, and be incredibly strategic and map out our budget plans over the next 5 years. So as we are doing that, we're going to share a little bit more with you about that in just a minute. There are several things that we have to look at and that we have to consider in order to ensure that we're accurately planning for the 5 years and projecting correctly. One of those things is enrollment projections. We have to look at the number of students we have, but we have to predict how many we're going to have next year and how many we're going to have over the next 5 to 10 years, so that we know as a community and as a district, are we increasing, which means we're going to have increased need for additional funds, for additional facilities, so that enrollment projection is very, very important.
Yes, part of the enrollment projection goes in line with the state funding. So we, as you know, we receive state funding, local funding, and federal funding. Well, the state funding, the way it used to work, the funding worked was, it's always ADM based on the number of students that we have. But if our ADM went down or up, they would adjust your funding mid-year. So if you had a reduction in ADM, then it was detrimental because they would adjust your funding mid-year when you've already had this plan, your budget planned out for the remainder of the year. Well, they've switched to a formula called funding in arrears this fiscal year, and what that does is they're saying if you have an ADM increase or decrease, they're going to fund you in arrears, so they're going to fund you based on your ADM from the previous year. So, but if your ADM increases, we'll give you that extra money this year. But if your funding decreases, we are going to hold you harmless for the remainder of that school year, and they won't reduce our funding until the following year, which is very helpful for budgetary planning, because at least now we don't have to worry about an unexpected funding decrease potentially mid-year because of an ADM decrease. Luckily, we increased this year. So yay us, we did get a little bit of extra funding this year, which was a wonderful surprise. So we're hoping to keep that trajectory going. So that's basically how funding in arrears is working for us, and it will help us with future budgeting.
Yes, much, much better for the vision of the school system, because we would adopt a budget and then they could take money back mid-year. So then you have to re-look at everything and figure out how to make that work without the money you originally allocated. So this is a good thing. This is a much better model for our school system. The next thing is our capital planning. So looking at our long-term facility and infrastructure needs, as well as how we're going to fund those, so what are our financing options? And I'll give you an example of this. E.J. Hayes has been on the replacement list for the last 3 5-year plans. And so as a board, that is something we're going to need to really, really look at. We know that when we brought in our architect, the architect clearly said that the high school was in dire need of replacement for a lot of reasons. It had the greatest capital needs in addition to ADA compliance issues. But we know our next step is looking at E.J. Hayes. It is the oldest school in our district, and so really getting a game plan now, not to build tomorrow, but in our 5-year plan, having a strategic avenue to get us there. I will tell you that the principal actually submitted a new E.J. Hayes in her budget that was turned in this year, and so as we're planning for that, we are, hearing that request. We had to put that in a different column due to the large expense, but that is something that we do have to plan for now, and that needs to be in the forefront as we're presenting to our county commission. Because again, this is not something for tomorrow, but we need to plan now for 2 years down the road, for 3 years down the road. That is a big piece of this 5-year development, because securing the money for the capital needs and projects of that size is going to take time. It's going to take strategic planning. And then the other piece is our program integration. So an example of this will be our technology department. We were not completely one-to-one a couple of years ago. We now are completely one-to-one. Every child and every staff, every teacher in Martin County Schools has their own device. It is assigned specifically to them. And we have also implemented a replenishment plan. So each year we collect those tech fees, so that we are banking those in our finance department, so that we are going to be able to replenish on a 2 to 3 year cycle as the needs arise. So right now, as we were looking at it today, and looking at our projections and our replenishment needs, we have money there to support the replenishment. Now, we are not saying that it will replenish everything that we want, but there is a systemic process in place, and the state is considering that many schools purchase new devices during COVID. Because we were allocated the COVID funds, many schools, including us, use part of that money to replenish devices, the state also realizes that they're all going to expire at the same time. And many districts did not have that sustainability plan, so we are hoping, fingers crossed, that the state may provide additional funds to replenish some of our devices this year, which would then allow us to hold on to our tech payments to replenish and have an even stronger plan in the future. Because we are just starting this. When we went one-to-one is when we started our replenishment plan. So this will be a big win for Martin County Schools if the state does help us fund that. But those program integration pieces are critical in the 5-year plan development. Another area of this will be curriculum. Another area of this will be textbooks. One of the big wins for our early college is that when, and you notice I say when, not if, we are officially approved by the legislature for our early college, we will receive funding for our college textbooks. Right now, we do not receive that funding. We have to use our K-12 textbook money for those college textbooks, which means there's less left for curriculum. But if we can, when we receive our early college, then that's going to open up that planning. Again, these are all things that we have to consider, those intricate details in the 5-year plan.
Okay, so we're going to go over our state allotment analysis. Basically, what we have to do is the state will put out a planning allotment, and we take that planning allotment to see what we can fund with the state allocation, which in turn lets us know what we can use, what we need to fund in the local allocation. We are currently waiting on that. The state was supposed to have planning allotments to us last week. We received an email that says hopefully we'll have them this week. So, fingers crossed, we will have that soon, so we can then go ahead and move forward with those budgets. With the state, once we figure out what they will allocate to us for planning allotments, we can move forward to the local. In the local, we have to make sure that we encompass all of the fixed costs first, and then we can go ahead and move on to other costs that we need to build in. Some things with the state that we need to know is, with the state, they do not allow us to cover maintenance, they do not allow us to cover athletics, they do not allow us to cover to a point professional development. The state used to give us an allotment specifically for professional development. They do not give us that any longer, and so we have to build that into our local budget. So there are a lot of things on the local side that hinge on the state side. So we're really at a standstill until we receive those allotments from the state.
And again, this is part of our local budget development. We've been working a lot on our capital budget development. The local is at a standstill until we receive our allotments, because you can't know where you're going until you know where you are. Another big piece of that is pay raises. If the state awards a pay raise, it's going to provide those pay raises for state-funded employees. But we have employees who would require those raises who are paid locally, who are not supplied by state funds. And so we have to project those raises and then offset the cost as we develop our local budget, which is critical to anticipating that correctly, because that can be a huge cost in our local budget.
With that local budget as well, the state will give us our preliminary allotments, but they haven't actually given us the increases for potential salary increases or for potential health insurance increase, new retirement rate. We haven't received any of that from them either, so we do projections on that. And what we're going to be using is the consumer price index for salaries, and then also to justify the increases in just everyday maintenance costs and custodial costs, all of those things. Everyone knows that the prices of everything are going up, and so we will use that CPI to calculate those items. We're going to be using an average for the state retirement increase over the last 3 years, and then we'll have to use an average for that health insurance increase as well, to help facilitate this. Again, this is the new year of a budget for the state, and so sometimes we don't get those numbers until well into the new fiscal year, unfortunately, and so we are going to do our best to project those numbers out. But again, like Dr. White was saying, those figures have to cover everything. So again, if the state, hopefully, they would give us at least a 3% like they did last year, but the 3% doesn't cover all of our employees. We have a lot of staff that is locally funded, and we have a lot of staff that is funded in pots of money with the state that don't receive the increase because of salary increases. So we have two separate pots. We have position allotments and we have dollar allotments. If it's a position allotment pot, the state will fund us that extra money for those salary increases. If it's a dollar allotment pot, we don't get funded that extra money. They say, this is your dollar allotment. And if it's an open pot, and it gets very, very complicated, but if it's an open pot of money where we can spend that money on more than just people, that pot doesn't increase with the state funding. We have to figure it out. We have to absorb that increase, and so that flows into our local budget as well, where all of the folks that we have locally funded, the state mandates this raise, which mandates us to have to give it to everyone, no matter where they're funded, and we have to figure out where that money comes from. So that's where we will rely heavily on the county to help back us with that, but sometimes that stays flat.
Another big piece of this is looking at any contractual commitments or mandated programs. An example of this would be our charter school payments, our regional school payment. So when we receive our money from the county commissioners, it's important to know that we don't get to keep all of that money. Part of that money actually has to be disseminated to 15 charters? Nine charter schools, that we have students who reside in Martin County but attend those charter schools, and so a portion of our funding actually goes to them. So it is important to note that when money is given to the school system, we actually don't get to retain all of that funding. It has to go to those other entities as well.
And we actually, just to let you know how much money that really is in perspective, so the county gave us $6.2 million for this fiscal year. 1.2 million of that goes directly to charter schools. So that's a huge decrease right off. Yes, 1.2 million goes to charter schools. And not only that, we also have to give NERSBA an additional allotment as well, because NERSBA is considered a regional school. They're kind of in the middle between a public school and a charter school. With them being a regional school, they still receive state funding. They don't receive that funding directly from the state because they're technically students in our school district. We have to cover that funding, and so they let us know how many students that they have, and then DPI takes an amount of money off the top of one of our funding sources to give to NERSBA for those students. And we can tell them what pot of money we want them to take it from, but you know, it's money is money when it comes to our funding. And so with that, we had to give NERSBA an additional $333,000. So with those combined, we're right off the top, 1.5 million out the door to charter schools. So it's a huge number.
So suppose NERSBA changed their name to NERSBA Early College. Will it make any difference?
So are you saying like reclassify them not as a regional school?
Yeah.
That would make a difference because of the additional funding we have to pay them due to them being a regional school.
I think so.
And keep in mind, they're the only regional school in the state, so it gets a little tricky because they're the only one, and so any rules and everything's in place, you know, are actually developed for them. But technically, the extra funding we have to give them is because they are a regional school.
That is
So
correct.
if they were a charter or something else, theoretically, we would not have to give them that money. But they're the only one in the state, so we don't have anything to compare it to, right?
Question.
Mr. Shaw?
Now, the students that we have to write this 1.5 million to, is that a check you write every month?
Yes, sir. We write that check every month. We do a new calculation every month based on the ADM. So as our ADM goes up or down, same thing with the charter schools. As their ADMs go up and down, our calculation is recalculated every month to make sure that we give them exactly what they're entitled to. And that is based off of our local funding. So the only school that gets any of our state funding is NERSPA.
So when we're looking at these things, after we've done all of this, so we've gotten our state allotment, we've analyzed all that, we've looked at our current year analysis with looking at basically where we are to know where we're going. We look at our obligations, so charter school payments, contractual commitments. After we plan for all of that, then we're able to consider any new initiatives. So when the principals or school improvement teams are requesting new things, this is the area of the budget that we actually consider those things, because we have to know where we are to know where we can fit these things. Could it be in year 1? Could it be in year 2? Is it going to have to be in year 3, 4, or 5, based on where we are with our contractual agreements right now, and enrollment projections, state allotment projections, all of those things. And then, of course, we also have to consider the contingency plan, the what-if questions. Things such as, you know, we have a chiller that needs replacing at South Creek Elementary School. That's a $700,000 repair. And so we have to have a plan, a contingency, which we do, for these types of things that can suddenly occur, and then we need to repair them. When we're thinking about our new construction at Martin County High School, we are so thankful, so blessed to have the grant, but we know that we have to have a contingency plan. We know that our county's been clear about not wanting to fund extra dollars, and so we have to be very conscious of that in our budget development, so that we are trying to create our own contingency plan throughout the construction process. Something you've read about in the media is the cutting of federal funds. And so as we are working on our budget, God forbid that happen, because that would be absolutely detrimental to Martin County schools. But if that were, God forbid, to happen, what is our game plan? What could we do to try to offset some of that detriment to the school system? So as we are thinking through our local budget process, those are the steps that we take, and all the way through actually looking at a contingency plan for the what-ifs. You know, COVID would have been a part of the contingency plan. Nobody predicted, you know, that pandemic. That was definitely something that would have been a contingency. So we predict and think through everything that we possibly can, and then understand there could be some things coming our way that we simply would have never predicted, but we need to be as prepared as we can, which takes us into our capital budget. When we look at the capital budget, a lot of the process is the same. We are able to do a bit more of this because we have more to work with. We're not waiting for the state to give us certain allotments so that we can move forward. We have worked through the piece with the school, and so when we get that, we're able to really go to work and working on our capital projects with Mr. Edwards as well. So one of the things we have to consider in our capital budget is our new construction. We know that we're building a new Martin County High School, so that is already in place. We just talked about contingencies for that we're trying to think through in our local budget. But then you've got to think through the major renovations and repairs. Right now, E.J. Hayes is a school that their repairs are mounting. And when I look historically, like I said, it's been on the table to replace in the last 3 5-year plans. So there are projects that were put off there because with the intention of replacing the school, but we haven't done that yet. Interestingly enough, the needs at the high school still outweighed that school, but we are at a point where we need to be planning in this 5 years to do something with E.J. Hayes. So in step 2, we would need to be thinking about our new construction plan for E.J. Hayes Elementary School, as well as some facility upgrades throughout our district. One thing we're going to talk about in step 4, an essential repair, would be the entryway to our schools. We really want to secure all school entries so that you do not walk directly into the school and then turn and go into the office. You walk directly into the office. So a door that leads you directly into the office, but does not allow entry into the school. So that's something we're going to be bringing to the board and to the county in our projects this year. We also are working on a plan for our HVAC systems that are in-date plans. So looking at every facility in Martin County Schools, when was HVAC installed? What is the life expectancy? What is the end date? Because then with our county, we're able to say, in 5 years, we know that this will be at life capacity. In 2 years, it gives us a more accurate working in advance versus waiting for something to break in order to fix it. And so we are working on a 5 to 10 year plan that encompasses life dates for our equipment, including roofs, HVAC systems, anything in those, some of those chillers I mentioned earlier, any of those things that we know are going to have a life date and be those huge repairs. The biggest thing for step 4 again will be our safety. Any essential repairs, you know, of course, there's just a maintenance budget every year. You can't predict everything. Sometimes things are just going to break, and so we have to look at our historical figures and account for how much we need to include in our maintenance budget, as well as our preventative maintenance. There are certain things that we know we have to do on yearly contracts, like pest control, preventative maintenance items that we can look historically and know this is about how much it's going to cost, and then, of course, with the 3 to 10% increase that we're seeing across the board. Correct. Anything else on the capital? And then I do have links there just so you can see how we're laying out the budget items under capital budget requests. There is a link there that kind of lets you see. This is a draft. This is not what we are what we are presenting to you. This is lots of hours of work that is still ongoing, but just for you to wrap your head around, okay, what does this look like? How are they dividing all the school requests? So you've got a sample school request, and then you've got that 5 to 10 year plan, which shows you how we're meticulously taking each thing and trying to project. And Mr. Edwards is a huge part of this as well, in the maintenance department, sitting down and then pinpointing where everything needs to go as far as the 5-year plan. And again, that is just a draft. So now we're just going to give an overview of the timeline just so you kind of know what we've been working with. In January, that's where we started with the school level input. So that is when the staff started looking at what the needs were in their school, dreaming with their principal, doing the walkthroughs, all of those things. In February is when their budgets were due, I believe February 17th. I'm thinking off the top of my head, but I believe that was their due date to the district. And so between January and February 17th, they put together all of their school requests due to Emily and myself by that date. Then the district compilation starts, and that's what we have been working on since then. In March, we actually start developing the budget and begin to create the presentation like what we're doing for you tonight, just to tell you kind of where we are, what's going on, any updates that we have. And then in April, we're going to bring the actual budget to you for approval. So we'll prayerfully get our allotments this week and actually be able to say, here is our draft budget, answer any questions, get that approval, and then later in the month of April is when the county, we'll take it to the county commissioners for their approval as well. And then by June, the county commissioner budget allocation will be received. So we present our needs, and then they tell us what they have decided to award, and then Emily will bring back the budget resolution to you based on what they allocated for us. So we have to then go through and look at the needs versus the allocation and do it all over again based on the funding that they have actually given us. And again, part of this, we want to be as transparent as we can be. We have really been working with our county commissioners, and they've been working with us to have a strong relationship and really work together to be a catalyst in moving our community, our entire county forward. And so we just want to be as transparent as we can be in the whole budget development process throughout, so that we can continue to forge that good relationship. We'd be glad to answer any questions that the board may have.
Questions?
Very good presentation.
Thank you. I just have one point, just of clarification. Did I understand that you said we have 9 charter schools that we're making payment?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, because there are virtual charter schools as well that we
Ah.
have to, that, we have to make the same payment to the virtual schools as the brick and mortar schools now, versus in years past, we did not, but the state legislation changed, and so
Okay.
now we have to make that higher payment to like North Carolina Virtual Academy, and so, yes.
How about homeschool?
No, ma'am,
Do anything for that?
no, ma'am.
Don't
So
give any
regional
ideas.
and charter.
No ideas, don't give
I
any
know.
ideas.
Unless they come up with an
Expecting that.
And this week in your weekly update, I'll provide you a list of all of those schools, just to give you a
That would be
frame of
interesting.
reference.
That seems like a very high
It
number to
does.
me.
When I list the names, it'll make more sense.
Okay, well, it looks like just a lot of hard work, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, guys.
Can we get a motion to go in closed session?
The Martin County Board of Education will enter closed session subject to advice from the attorney pursuant to NC General Statute 143-318.11A1 and A6 to prevent the disclosure of confidential personnel information under GS 115C-319 and to consider matters relating to additional employment of an individual employee. The board will also go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A3 to consult the board's attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statute 143.318.11A1 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 U.S.C. 1232G and NC General Statute 115C-402. The board will also go into closed session to establish or instruct staff or agents concerning the terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property as provided in the North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A5.
Have a motion, can we get a second? We're going to closed session.
Second.
We properly moved to second. All in favor of going into closed session, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Motion carried. We're now going to closed session. Thank you. We have our board retreat, March 27th through the 28th. And on April 7th, we have our regular board meeting. Any comments, board members? Anything, Dr. White? Okay, so I want to say a happy St. Patrick's Day. All those that don't have on green, you will see me afterwards to get pinched. We will adjourn. I'm not sure what time it is. Can we get a motion to adjourn at 7:47?
Second.
Been properly moved and second.
Third.
To adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
7:48.
7:48. We didn't make